Are Christian beliefs enough to get you kicked out of the military? That's what some members of Congress are considering right now. Hi, I'm Stuart Shepard, and this is First Liberty Live. This is the first in a series of episodes that we'll be doing in connection with Military Appreciation Month. But before we get started, we also want to acknowledge that this is the National Day of Prayer. And all across America, people are pausing today to pray for our nation, for our leaders, and for our future. As an organization, we're participating in that, and we invite you to also take part in National Day of Prayer today and pray for the country, pray for our future. We also invite you to like and share these videos. It's how we meet new people, and we appreciate that you're being part of that. Hey, Mike Berry is General Counsel here at First Liberty Institute. He's also a Lieutenant Colonel in the Marine Corps Reserve. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Stuart.
Recently, you got dragged to Washington, and they asked you to testify at the Armed Services Committee, and the topic was extremism in the military. And you were there as a panelist alongside a university professor and also an executive from the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is an organization that labeled for a time Ben Carson as an extremist and then issued a sorry not sorry apology for putting him in that category. What did you hope to bring to that conversation as they discussed this topic of extremism in the military?
Well, as the House Armed Services Committee had this hearing on extremism in the armed forces, it was clear to me that their goal was to eradicate so-called extremists from our military. And so the main point for me to drive home there was, first of all, nobody wants to see true extremists removed from the military more than those of us who serve or have served. True extremists, which I'll define in just a second, but true extremists they really tarnish our reputation as veterans, as service members. They give the country a black eye, and so we want to see them gone. Now, as I said, I use the term true extremist, though, because I believe you can't defeat what you can't define or what you haven't defined. And thus far, neither Congress nor the Department of Defense has defined what they mean by extremism. And that's really where a lot of the problems with violating constitutional rights, First Amendment rights, religious freedom, etc., have arisen, is because they're casting such a wide net for how to define extremism that essentially anything could be an extremist. So I wanted to give a sort of a warning that if you do this, right, first of all, yes, we should be getting rid of extremists, but more importantly, we need to define what we mean by extremism before we go about trying to figure out how to get rid of them.
And part of what I appreciated in the way that you dealt with the interrogation that you underwent there was they kept trying to push you to try to make it sound like you were defending extremists, which you were not. What you're really defending is where are we going to draw that line between who's in and who's out, because in this current cancel culture, a lot of the people and groups that we all would agree are in, there will also be those of us who hold to traditional Christian beliefs that they would cancel right out because of the things that we stand for. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's really one of the big concerns, not just from me, but we're hearing this from service members, people who are currently serving on active duty in the military, veterans, their family members and loved ones, and others who are saying, look, where is this going to stop? It's one thing to label someone who supports a violent ideology, somebody who supports Al-Qaeda or Hamas, which, by the way, we do label those as extremists. In our government labels Hamas and Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah as extremist groups, and rightfully so. But we've also uncovered, at First Liberty, we've uncovered documents produced by the Department of Defense labeling Catholics and evangelical Christians as extremists as well. That's highly problematic. I mean, that's the proverbial slippery slope where, okay, look, if you're going to lump in evangelical Christians and Catholics with Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, the KKK, etc., where does it stop?
What do you think is behind that desire to broaden the definition, to start scooping in people who hold to Christian values, and particularly conservative Christian values?
Well, I think there's a number of sources for the pressure that's being put on the Department of Defense to do that. I think there's pressure to show that they're actually rounding up extremists, right, and kicking them out or prosecuting them. They need to be able to show, look, we caught 10 extremists last month, or whatever the case might be. By the way, on that point, the latest numbers from the Department of Defense, in the last 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, they removed a grand total of, I think it was 5 people from all 4 branches, across all 4 branches, over the last 4 years.
Out of millions of people serving.
Out of, exactly. So the numbers are minuscule, right? And so they have to show that all this isn't for naught, right? That there's a whole lot of energy and effort and money and resources being poured into this effort. We're going to combat extremism. We're going to get rid of them. And if at the end of the day, they're asked, well, what did you do? Right? They want to be able to show, oh yeah, we got rid of extremists. So I think they start casting a much, much wider net. And there's also pressure from outside, though. Groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center and others, they have an agenda that they want to advance to try to label, inappropriately label, people who hold mainstream, mainline religious beliefs and moral beliefs that no, like you're an extremist because you don't agree with our ideology.
And they're a group that the mainstream media likes to point to because they come up with a hate list, groups that they put on their hate group list. And because of that, the media goes, see, this nonpartisan group with no axe to grind has put all these groups on a hate list, but they don't exactly have the cleanest reputation when it comes to operating as an organization. They have their own problems that have been revealed. One of the issues that you've pointed out, though, is if Congress itself were going to make these rules, it'd be one thing, but you get the sense that they're outsourcing that to other groups that would be doing the actual footwork?
Well, in the past, the Department of Defense has used the Southern Poverty Law Center and other outside groups as sort of a resource, right? They've said, here's a resource for how to figure out and how to identify who extremists are and what are the telltale signs of being an extremist. And I'll tell you, Stuart, one of the documents that we obtained, people don't have to take our word for it. This is actually produced by the Department of Defense. We have the documents. We can make them available to anybody who wants them. And there's a Department of Defense training guide. And this guide is produced for people whose job within the military is to provide for equal opportunity. So this is their job is essentially to prevent discrimination in the military.
Yeah.
And this training guide actually says there's an entire section dedicated to how to identify extremists and what to do about it. And in the part about how to identify extremists, they talk about what are the motives that extremists use to recruit. And I'm going to give you a direct quote from this training guide, and it says, quote, "Nowadays, instead of dressing in sheets and publicly espousing hate messages, most extremists will talk about things like individual liberties, states' rights, and how to make the world a better place," end quote. So
Wow.
Think about that. The Department of Defense itself is saying the way you can identify if somebody is a potential extremist is if they start talking about individual liberties, states' rights, and how to make the world a better place. I got to tell you, the last time I checked, the people who wrote the Constitution, I'm pretty sure they believed in individual liberties, states' rights, and how to make the world a better place. That's
I
if
think
my
we can
history
say that,
if my history is correct, that's why they actually came to this country and created the United States of America.
Yeah, and it's also a characteristic traits of people who tend to join the military. I mean, that sounds like everybody I've ever known, people in my family who've gone on to be part of the military.
That's exactly right, but you know who else joins the military? People of faith, right? All the studies that we have show that people of faith, people who identify as highly religious, are the most likely demographic to join the military. And if the Department of Defense, if the Pentagon is now going to start saying, oh, well, if you are a person of faith, if you identify as highly religious, you could be an extremist, and you're not welcome in the military. This is not the place for you. Guess what? That recruiting pipeline is going to shut off completely because those people who are most likely to join the military are going to start hearing the message, you're not welcome, right? You don't belong in the service. And I've been talking about this for a while, but that when you do that, it actually has national security implications because in order to maintain a strong, viable military force, we have to have enough numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, the military is simply just having enough numbers to go toe-to-toe with what we call in the military speak our peer and near peer adversaries. So those other countries around the world, and we can go down the list, China, North Korea, Iran, Russia, et cetera, who want to be able to take the United States off of the top dog spot. And when we don't have enough people willing to join the military, because and in fact, there was just an article this morning I saw in the Army Times saying the Army is now concerned that it's not going to be able to meet its recruiting goals. And what was one of the number one reasons? Increased politicization of the military.
Yeah.
So it's going to hurt our military.
And to give people a full picture of this, of what we're talking about, and I'll just pick one. There are many topics that we could bring up here to illustrate, but the one that I kept hearing mentioned, and I've seen over time mentioned, because I've followed this for a long time, is if you believe that marriage is the union of one man and one woman for life, that's an extreme view in the eyes of some of the groups that they're asking to define who's in and who's out. But I dare say that's most Americans.
Yeah. So to address that, a couple of points. One, as you mentioned earlier, we should not be outsourcing the definition of extremism in the military to outside groups, right, that don't necessarily have any affiliation with the military. This is something that Congress should define, or the Pentagon itself. If Congress wants to delegate that decision to the Pentagon, it should be defined by people who have some skin in the game, as we say, right? And secondly, when it comes to when they finally decide how to define what an extremist is, exactly as you pointed out, they need to be very careful to use the appropriate definition. Because if you start saying, well, it's whatever a commander thinks it should be, right? The old, I don't know the definition, but I know it when I see it. Then, if it's left to the whims of a commander, one commander could say, if you believe that marriage should be defined as one man and one woman, which, by the way, most religious traditions have held for millennia that's the definition of marriage, then, you're an extremist. Bye-bye. You're not welcome here. And court-martial or separation from the military, et cetera. Or, how about this? If you believe that getting vaccinated might not be the best decision for you and your family, and for whatever reason, medical opposition, religious opposition, moral opposition to getting vaccinated, you're an extremist. That's an extreme point of view. You're an extremist. Get out. Court-martial, separation, etc. So that's why.
And to be clear, we're not saying whether someone should get the vaccine. It's whether they should have the freedom to choose whether to get the vaccine.
That's right. And it shouldn't be up to. And look, and the decision to get a vaccine or not is their decision, and whether or not the military has an interest in making sure that its service members are not going to get sick, whether it's COVID vaccine, malaria vaccine, anthrax vaccine, et cetera, right? That's a military policy decision. What we're talking about is the mere fact that you hold those beliefs, that you may hold that viewpoint. Does that make you an extremist, right? Because what the military is clearly saying right now is, if we label you an extremist, once you've been tagged with that label, you're now wearing that scarlet letter, that scarlet E on your uniform. Bye-bye. Your career's over, and we're going to kick you out. That is clearly a constitutional violation. And as I've warned, I warned the House Armed Services Committee, and if you do that, not only is it a constitutional violation, you're going to have, you're essentially inviting massive amounts of litigation, because defense lawyers around the country are going to be lining up to sign up clients to challenge these.
Now, you served as an attorney in the military. That was part of what you did while you served. So you know the military code of justice better than most. Does the military need to do anything? This is a question people might ask. Or are there already enough laws on the books to handle this, enough laws and regulations to deal with this right now?
Yeah, it's not just a question that people might ask. That is a question that I was repeatedly asked by members of Congress at the hearing. What mechanisms or tools do we have available to us to address extremism, right? Once we've identified who they are, do we have the tools available necessary to address it? The answer is yes, absolutely. It's not as if people holding violent extremist views is a new thing, right, in terms of society and civilization. For as long as there have been people, there have been other people who want to do harm to certain people groups, right? That's violent ideology. And in our country, we've had for decades, if not longer, laws that say you can't do, you can't, not only can you not kill other people, but you can't go around advocating the death of other people or violence being done to other people simply because you disagree with their viewpoints. And all we need to do is enforce the laws that we already have. Not just laws at the federal level, but even within the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We prohibit violent extremism, violent extremist ideology. We prohibit that through regulations. I mean, there's a myriad of mechanisms and tools available to the military, to military commanders, to get rid of true extremists when we find them.
Now, let's bring this into real life because it's not theoretical. We're actually dealing with and working with service members who were singled out because they publicly expressed their beliefs that were in line with traditional Christian values. Let's talk about some of the examples we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, at First Liberty, we've seen a significant uptick in the number of military and veterans, service members and veterans who've been reaching out to us, questioning things like, as one of the examples we talked about earlier. I'm not sure about the COVID vaccine. I have a religious objection, but guess what? I also, my doctor says it might harm me. Mm-hmm. I'm predisposed for certain side effects, and so he's advised me not to get it, or at least to wait. And now the military is telling me I have to get it. What recourse do I have? And part of that is not just the legal right to say I object on religious grounds to getting the vaccine, but as we talked about, it's not only can we force you to get it, if you don't get it, we're going to label you an extremist.
Right.
So not only can we kick you out for not getting the vaccine, we can kick you out because you're an extremist. All right. Or what about service members, especially chaplains? We've had a number of chaplains who've reached out because, and I guess I need to provide a little bit of background context here.
Yeah.
When you're a military chaplain in uniform, you are essentially on loan to the military from your religious group, right? So if you're a Southern Baptist chaplain, you belong to the Southern Baptist Convention. The North American Mission Board is the organization that sends chaplains to the military. And because of that, you actually have to adhere to the teachings of the Southern Baptist Church. If you're a Catholic chaplain, same thing. You must adhere to the teachings of the Catholic Church in everything you do as a chaplain. And that includes your religious beliefs and how you talk about your religious beliefs and how you promote those religious beliefs and how you conduct religious services. And another issue we've seen arising is when military chaplains who come from maybe what we would call the more conservative religious traditions, who believe in marriage as between one man and one woman, who believe that your biological sex is assigned at birth, right? That it's not changeable as you grow older based on your own feelings or decisions. Then those chaplains are now being labeled extremists, and they're now being subject to investigations, subject to punishment. And at First Liberty, we represent, in fact, a chaplain who is undergoing that very ordeal right now, and hopefully we'll have more to share about that in coming weeks.
All right. Mike, thank you for sharing with us today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with Congress and with us. And also, thank you for your service. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. And I guess one last point I want to make is the final parting message that I had to the Armed Services Committee is we have to get this right, because it truly is a national security matter. If we tell people of faith, you're not welcome in the military, they're not going to join the military, right? America's mothers and fathers are not going to send their sons and daughters to join the military if people of faith are not welcome. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up was people of faith currently in the military as well comprise the largest demographic in the military. So we're talking about people who are serving and people who want to serve.
Right.
We need to make sure, in order to have religious freedom that truly flourishes in this country, we need to make sure those doors stay open so that people will know, yes, you can serve in uniform in this country and maintain your faith. You can live out your faith while you are in uniform.
All right. Thanks again, Mike. Appreciate your insights. Very helpful.
Thanks for having me.
You know, First Liberty Institute is a nonprofit law firm that exclusively does religious freedom cases. If the work we do is something you would like to see accomplished in the world, we invite you to join with us. Just go to firstlibertylive.com and click on the big red Give button. And if you haven't already, join the thousands of people who subscribe to our live videos and our other video projects that we do. If you click on the subscribe button, we'll give you a notification to let you know when new episodes are released. You'll be the very first ones to find out. Next Thursday, as part of our series on Military Appreciation Month, we'll be talking with Chad Robichaux, a friend of yours, I believe. Is that correct? He's a Special Ops Marine, also an MMA fighter, who also entered the battle against PTSD. And we'll be talking about all of that next week right here on First Liberty Live.